There are moments in my career where I sit across from someone and I just know from the moment they walk onto that stage that their entire existence is a carefully constructed house of cards, one unexpected breeze away from total collapse. It's not about judgment. It's about observation, a trained eye picking up on the subtle tells, the guarded glances, the way they hold their breath just a fraction too long when asked a direct question. They walk in, often with an entourage of confused or angry family members, presenting a narrative they've practiced 1,000 times in their head, but the truth, the real, raw truth, it's always simmering just beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity or a prod to boil over. This particular case, I remember it vividly. Her name was Evelyn. She came to us because her family, specifically her mother and sister, were at their wits' end. They described Evelyn as increasingly withdrawn, evasive, and prone to unexplained absences and mysterious expenses. On the surface, Evelyn was a picture of success, a burgeoning career in marketing, a seemingly stable long-term relationship with a man named David whom the family adored, and a reputation for being the responsible, grounded one among her siblings. But the family felt a growing chasm between the Evelyn they thought they knew and the one who was becoming a ghost in her own life. They accused her of being selfish, of lying, of hiding something significant, though they couldn't put their finger on exactly what. They saw her as cold, manipulative, and disconnected. They used words like fraud and deceiver to describe her, not just to me, but in their own private conversations, which often turned into screaming matches. My initial impression of Evelyn was intriguing. She carried herself with an almost regal posture, shoulders back, chin slightly up, but her eyes, those were the windows to the real story. They darted. They held a flicker of something close to terror, and beneath all that composure, I sensed an exhaustion so profound it was almost physical. She looked like a woman who hadn't slept deeply in years, constantly on alert. When I looked at her, I didn't see a manipulative fraud. I saw a woman trapped. Trapped by what? I wasn't entirely sure yet, but the weight of it was palpable. It was clear she wasn't just hiding something from her family, she was hiding it from herself, or at least trying desperately to deny the full scope of its impact. She presented her problem as a family misunderstanding, a communication breakdown, an overbearing mother, and a jealous sister. All common narratives, all easy to grasp, but none of them quite fit the depth of the anxiety radiating off her. It was too rehearsed, too polished, like she was reading from a script someone else had written, and she was just trying to remember her line. The central problem, as far as Evelyn was concerned, was her family's inability to trust her, their incessant meddling in her personal affairs. But what I saw was a person actively engaged in a deep-seated deception, not just of others, but fundamentally of herself. The seeds of this elaborate deception weren't sown overnight. They had been germinating for years, watered by a potent mix of expectation and fear. Evelyn grew up in a household where achievement wasn't just encouraged, it was demanded. Her mother, a formidable woman with an unshakable sense of what was right and proper, had always mapped out Evelyn's life. A good education, a respectable career, a stable partner, a conventional family. Evelyn, the eldest, had taken on this mantle with a quiet determination, always striving to be the perfect daughter, the shining example. She excelled in school, pursued a sensible degree, and found herself in a promising career. Her relationship with David, a kind, steady man who fit all the criteria her mother approved of, seemed like the final piece of the puzzle. Everyone looked at Evelyn and saw success, stability, the embodiment of their highest hopes. But beneath that meticulously crafted facade, there was a different Evelyn, one who felt increasingly suffocated by the expectations, by the narrow path she had chosen, or rather, that had been chosen for her. There was a part of her that craved something wilder, something less predictable, something that felt truly her own, untainted by the judgment of others. This yearning, this quiet rebellion, began subtly. It started with small, clandestine trips, weekends away she'd explain away as work conferences or girls' trips. Then came the phone calls she'd take in hushed tones, the late nights she'd spend supposedly working, the growing distance in her relationship with David, which she attributed to stress from work. The behavior patterns were classic avoidance, distraction, deflection, and eventually outright fabrication. She'd create intricate alibis, weave stories that were just plausible enough to pass muster, but always left a slight nagging question in the minds of those closest to her. I could see, even in our pre-show interviews, how this pattern had become her default mode of operation. Every interaction was a calculation, every word weighed, every gesture considered. She wasn't living, she was performing. The emotional toll of this constant charade was immense. She spoke of feeling isolated, even though she was surrounded by people who loved her. She described an almost unbearable burden of guilt, but it was a guilt she couldn't articulate, because to articulate it would be to confess, to shatter the very world she had so painstakingly built. This double life, whatever its specifics, wasn't just a choice, it had become a prison, meticulously constructed by her own hands, brick by fearful brick. She was living in two parallel universes, and the energy required to keep them from colliding was draining her of her very essence. It was a classic case of trying to be everything to everyone, and in doing so, losing herself entirely. She was desperately trying to keep the two worlds apart, but the stress fractures were becoming undeniable. The tension, of course, couldn't be contained forever. A double life, by its very definition, is unsustainable. It's like trying to hold two different rivers in the same channel. Eventually, one's going to overflow, or they're going to merge in a catastrophic deluge. For Evelyn, the leaks began as small trickles, easily explained away at first, but with increasing frequency, the stories became harder to swallow. Her mother, with her sharp, almost prosecutorial mind, started noticing patterns. Evelyn would suddenly be unreachable for hours, sometimes a full day, her phone going straight to voicemail. Then she'd resurface with a vague explanation about a work crisis or no signal. Her bank statements, which her mother still had access to for some shared family accounts, started showing unusual transactions, large cash withdrawals, purchases in unfamiliar cities, expenses that didn't align with her supposed schedule. Her sister Sarah was the first to openly confront her. Sarah, less concerned with propriety and more with Evelyn's emotional well-being, noticed the change in her demeanor, the increasing guardedness. She saw the light fading from Evelyn's eyes, replaced by a hollow exhaustion. One night, after Evelyn had missed a significant family gathering, her niece's birthday no less, citing an urgent client meeting that felt suspiciously vague, Sarah cornered her. "What is going on with you, Evelyn?" she demanded, her voice tight with a mixture of concern and frustration. "You're never here, you're always busy, and you look like you haven't slept in weeks. You're lying about something." Evelyn's reaction, as recounted by Sarah, was classic deflection. She grew defensive, her posture stiffening, her voice rising in indignation. "You're always so dramatic, Sarah." "I'm working hard, trying to build my career." Not everyone can afford to just sit around and criticize others' lives. She flipped the script, accusing Sarah of jealousy, of being unsupportive, of trying to sabotage her success. This blame shifting was a familiar tactic for Evelyn. Whenever cornered, she would lash out, projecting her own guilt and fear onto others, creating a smokescreen of anger to obscure the truth. David, her fiancé, also felt the growing distance. He loved Evelyn deeply, but he was a man of routine and honesty. He noticed her increasing emotional unavailability, the way she would physically flinch if he tried to spontaneously join her on an errand, or the vague excuses she gave for why they couldn't spend certain evenings together. He tried to talk to her, gently at first, expressing his concern, his feeling that she was pulling away. Her response to him was different, less aggressive, more mournful. She would apologize, blame, stress, promise to be better, but nothing ever fundamentally changed. He started to feel like he was losing her, that the woman he was supposed to marry was slipping through his fingers, replaced by a stranger. He watched her become a master of emotional manipulation, not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to keep her two worlds separate. She would invoke guilt, play the victim, or simply shut down entirely, leaving David feeling confused and helpless. The final straw came when Evelyn missed her own engagement party, a carefully planned event her mother had poured her heart into. Her excuse this time was a sudden, severe stomach flu. But a friend of the family, innocently browsing social media, saw a picture of Evelyn, looking perfectly healthy in a vibrant, unfamiliar city, laughing with people none of them recognized. The photo was taken at the exact time Evelyn was supposedly laid up in bed. That picture, once it circulated among the family, ignited a firestorm. The calls to Evelyn were met with silence, then furious denials. When she finally resurfaced, the family felt not just hurt, but betrayed, disrespected. They saw her carefully constructed world crumbling, and they were desperate for answers, for the truth, for the Evelyn they believed they knew. It was her mother who made the call to our show, not out of malice, but out of a desperate, last-ditch effort to save her daughter from whatever dark path she was on. She's losing everything her mother pleaded during our intake call. Her fiancé, her family, herself. We don't know what else to do. When Evelyn finally agreed to come on the show, it wasn't out of a desire for confession or resolution. It was, I believe, another calculated move. She saw it as an opportunity to publicly clear her name, to present her version of events, to cast herself as the victim of an overbearing family and their baseless accusations. She genuinely believed she could outsmart the process, spin the narrative in her favor, and emerge unscathed, perhaps even with public sympathy. She underestimated the power of truth, and she certainly underestimated what happens when you put someone in a room where their well-practiced defenses are systematically dismantled. She walked onto that stage, her head held high, ready for battle, but utterly unprepared for the internal war that was about to erupt. She was ready to defend her lies, but not to face the reasons why she was telling them. And that, right there, is where the real work begins. As Evelyn sat across from me, flanked by her visibly distressed mother and sister, the air in the studio was thick with unspoken accusations and years of pent-up frustration. Her body language was a masterclass in controlled defensiveness, arms often crossed, eyes scanning the audience rather than engaging directly, a slight, almost imperceptible tremor in her hands. We started by allowing her family to voice their concerns, to lay out the timeline of evasions, the inconsistencies, the emotional toll Evelyn's behavior had taken on them. Her mother spoke with a mix of anger and profound sadness, recounting the missed milestones, the blatant lies, the crushing disappointment. Sarah, her sister, was more direct, her voice quivering with a raw hurt. "You've become a stranger, Evelyn," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "We don't even know who you are anymore." Throughout their testimonies, Evelyn maintained a remarkably composed, almost stoic facade. She nodded occasionally, sometimes offered a dismissive sigh, and at one point even rolled her eyes, as if to say, "Here we go again," their usual dramatics. When it was her turn to speak, she launched into her well-rehearsed narrative. She was a successful professional, driven and ambitious, and her family simply couldn't handle her independence. She painted them as overbearing, jealous, and overly invested in her private life. "I work hard," she stated, her voice steady, "and sometimes that means I have to travel for work or stay late. They don't understand the demands of my career." It was a plausible story on the surface, but it completely sidestepped the core issues of deception and the fundamental erosion of trust. This is where my job really begins. It's about cutting through the noise, bypassing the practice narratives, and getting to the core of what's truly going on. I let her finish, let her present her polished defense, then I leaned forward. "Evelyn," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I hear you saying that your family is overreacting, that they don't understand your career. But what I'm hearing from them and what I'm seeing in your behavior suggests something far more significant. We're not talking about a busy professional. We're talking about a pattern of outright deception, of disappearing for days, of outright lying about your whereabouts and your activities." She bristled. "I haven't lied," she insisted, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "I've just been private." "Private is one thing, Evelyn," I responded, pushing gently. "Calling your family from a different time zone, saying you're sick in bed, when a photo surfaces of you laughing in a city thousands of miles away, that's not private. That's a deliberate fabrication." And your fiancé, David, who is sitting backstage right now, he's told us about the emotional distance, the excuses, the feeling that you're just not present anymore. How do you explain that? Is that just privacy too? Her composure began to crack. She shifted in her seat, her gaze becoming more evasive. "David and we're going through a rough patch, like all couples do. Work stress, you know." It was a flimsy excuse, and she knew it. I brought up the photograph. "Evelyn, let's talk about the engagement party. Your mother spent months planning that. It was a huge event for your family, for David, and you weren't there. You said you had the flu, but there's a photograph of you from that very day, looking perfectly well in San Francisco. What were you doing in San Francisco, Evelyn, when you were supposed to be sick in bed celebrating your engagement?" The studio went silent. Her eyes, which had been darting, now fixed on a point just over my shoulder, as if trying to disappear into the backdrop. The carefully constructed facade was starting to crumble under the weight of irrefutable evidence. She mumbled something about a work emergency that she couldn't talk about, a work emergency that required you to lie to your family, miss your own engagement party, and then show up in a photo looking like you were having the time of your life. I pressed, my tone sympathetic but unyielding. "Evelyn, the story you're telling yourself and trying to tell us, it doesn't hold water. There's a deeper truth here. What is it you're so desperately trying to protect? What's the secret?" She finally broke. Her shoulders slumped and her carefully composed posture collapsed. Her voice, which had been steady and defensive, now came out in a whisper laced with despair. It's complicated," she choked out, tears finally beginning to stream down her face. It was the first genuine emotion she had shown, and it signaled that the breakthrough was imminent. The mask had finally fallen. The dam had broken. Evelyn's carefully constructed composure shattered, and the tears, once held back with such rigid control, now flowed freely. "It's complicated," she'd whispered, and that was the opening I needed, the first crack in the fortress she'd built around herself. I let her cry for a moment, let the raw emotion wash over her, over the studio. This wasn't about shaming her. It was about creating a safe space for the truth, however painful, to emerge. Complicated, yes. I agreed, my voice softening, but it doesn't have to be. We're here to understand, Evelyn, not to judge. What is it you're so afraid of revealing? What is this double life you've been leading that has consumed you to the point of losing your family and almost your fiancé? She took a shaky breath, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. There was a desperate plea in her eyes, a mixture of fear and profound relief, as if part of her knew this moment had to come. I have another life, she confessed, her voice barely audible, a completely different life. In San Francisco, the words hung in the air, heavy and loaded. Her mother gasped, and Sarah let out a small, choked sob. What kind of life? I prompted gently. Tell me everything, Evelyn. And then it all came tumbling out. Evelyn revealed that for the past 3 years, she had been leading a double life. Her work trips to San Francisco weren't for marketing conferences, they were for her other job. She was a professional dancer performing in a contemporary dance troupe. Not just a hobby, but a full-time, demanding career that she pursued with a passion she had never allowed herself to express in her real life. She explained how it started. A chance encounter during a work conference in San Francisco. An old dance studio, she stumbled upon a flyer for an open audition. She danced as a child, loved it, but her mother had steered her towards more practical pursuits. The audition, she said, was a lark, a moment of rebellion, but she got the part. And for the first time in years, she felt alive, truly herself. The initial plan was just to do it for a few months, a temporary escape, but the joy, the camaraderie, the sheer physical and emotional release of dancing became an addiction. It filled a void she hadn't even realized existed, a deep, aching need for self-expression that her structured, conventional life could not fulfill. I couldn't tell anyone, she explained, her voice gaining a desperate intensity. My mother, she would have been devastated, disappointed. She sacrificed so much for me to have a good life, a stable life. A dancer, to her, that's not a career. It's frivolous. And David, he's so traditional. He wants a wife who's home, building a family, not someone who's constantly traveling, rehearsing late, wearing revealing costumes. The fear of disappointing her mother, of not living up to the perfect daughter persona, was immense. And the fear of David's judgment, of losing his stability and his love, was equally potent. So she compartmentalized, she meticulously crafted 2 separate existences. In one, she was the diligent marketer, the devoted fiancé, the responsible daughter. In the other, she was Evelyn, the artist, the free spirit, living purely for her passion. The physical toll, the mental gymnastics of keeping the 2 worlds from colliding had been immense. The exhaustion, the anxiety, the guilt, it had become her constant companions. I know I messed up, she sobbed, looking from me to her mother and sister, her gaze filled with regret. I know I hurt you, but I didn't know how else to be myself without losing everything. This was the core truth. Not that she was malicious, but that she was so desperate to integrate her authentic self with the expectations placed upon her that she broke herself trying to do it in secret. She thought she had to choose between being loved and being authentic. And in trying to have both, she almost lost everything. The breakthrough wasn't just the confession, it was the realization, finally articulated, of the profound internal conflict that had driven her to such elaborate lengths of deception. This wasn't about her trying to get away with something. It was about a woman desperately trying to find herself amidst a sea of expectations. And in that raw, emotional moment, I saw not a liar, but a deeply wounded soul longing to be understood. The silence that followed Evelyn's confession was profound, heavy with the weight of revelation. Her mother and sister, initially stunned, were now grappling with a cascade of emotions: shock, betrayal, but also, for the first time, a glimmer of understanding. It wasn't the malicious intent they had feared, it was something far more complex, born of a desperate need for self-preservation. This was the moment of reckoning, not just for Evelyn, but for her entire family. "So, Evelyn," I began, my voice clear and deliberate, "for 3 years you have been living 2 completely separate lives. One life, the one your family and fiancé know, is built on the foundation of what you believed was expected of you. The other, your life as a dancer in San Francisco, is built on your deepest passions, your truest self. And you truly believe there was no way to integrate these 2 parts of yourself without losing one or both." She nodded, tears still streaming. "Yes," she whispered, I couldn't see a way. My mom always wanted me to be stable. A dancer isn't stable. And David, he wants a family, a traditional life. I love him, I truly do. But when I'm dancing, I feel like I'm finally breathing. I didn't want to choose, so I tried to have both in secret. I turned my attention to her mother. "Brenda," I said, "you've heard Evelyn's confession. The lies, the deception, the hurt, it all stemmed from her fear of disappointing you, of not living up to the life you envisioned for her. How do you respond to that?" Brenda was visibly shaken. Her anger had dissipated, replaced by a deep sorrow and a dawning understanding. I just wanted what was best for her," she stammered, her voice thick with emotion. "I wanted her to be secure, to be happy. I didn't realize she was so unhappy with the life she had. I never wanted her to feel like she couldn't tell me anything." It was a moment of profound insight for Brenda, a realization of the unintended consequences of her well-meaning but prescriptive parenting. Sarah, Evelyn's sister, was equally affected. "I was so angry, Evelyn," she admitted, her own voice cracking. "I felt betrayed. But now, I understand why you did it. It doesn't excuse the lies, but I get it. You were trapped. This was crucial. Forgiveness and understanding weren't immediate, but the seeds were planted." Then it was time for David. He had been listening backstage, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. I brought him out. He walked onto the stage, his gaze fixed on Evelyn. The pain in his eyes was undeniable. "David," I said, "you've heard everything. Evelyn has been living a secret life, a life as a dancer, driven by a passion she felt she couldn't share with you or her family. How do you feel about this revelation?" He stood there for a long moment, processing. He looked at Evelyn, who was now openly weeping, her face streaked with tears, a picture of vulnerability. I'm heartbroken," he said, his voice low and raw. "Not just by the lies, but by the fact that you felt you couldn't tell me, that you thought I wouldn't accept this part of you." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I love you, Evelyn. I want to build a life with you, but a life built on secrets, that's not a life I can have. I need honesty. I need you to be fully present." This was the crossroads. Evelyn had to face the very real consequences of her actions and the possibility of losing everything she genuinely valued in her first life. She had to understand that her desire for authenticity, while valid, did not excuse the profound hurt her deception had caused. Evelyn, I said, turning back to her, you've been running from yourself, and in doing so, you've run from the people who love you. You built a wall of secrets because you believed they wouldn't accept the real you. But now the truth is out. This is your moment. You have to decide, are you going to continue to live in fear, or are you going to bravely integrate all parts of yourself and truly choose the life you want, honestly and transparently? Her head snapped up, a spark of resolve in her eyes, even through the tears. I want to be whole, she declared, her voice stronger now. I want to be honest. I want to try to fix this. I don't want to lose David. I don't want to lose my family. But I can't give up who I am. I can't give up dancing. The confrontation had moved beyond just a confession. It was a desperate plea for integration, for a way to embrace all facets of her identity without fear of reprisal. This was her breakthrough moment, accepting all of herself and finally daring to ask for acceptance from others. The air in the studio, once charged with accusation, now held a delicate balance of fragility and hope. Evelyn had laid bare her deepest secret, her core conflict. The truth, raw and painful, was finally out. The question now was, what comes next? Could she truly reconcile these two disparate parts of herself? And could her family, and especially David, truly forgive the deception and embrace the full, authentic Evelyn? I spent the next segment of the show facilitating a direct, honest dialogue between Evelyn, her mother, her sister, and David. It wasn't about quick fixes or facile apologies. It was about genuine understanding and setting the groundwork for rebuilding trust. I asked Brenda, Evelyn's mother, to acknowledge the pressure she inadvertently placed on Evelyn, the weight of her expectations. Brenda, I said, it's clear you love Evelyn and wanted the best for her. But sometimes, when we want something so much for our children, we can unintentionally close off paths they need to explore. Can you see how your vision for Evelyn's life might have made her feel she couldn't share her true passions with you? Brenda, her eyes still red-rimmed, nodded slowly. I see it now, she admitted, her voice trembling. I was so focused on providing security, on her having a good life, that I didn't stop to ask if it was her good life. I pushed her without realizing I was pushing her away from herself. It was a critical admission, a mother taking responsibility for her role in the dynamic, however unintentional. For Sarah, the conversation shifted to forgiveness and the reestablishment of sisterly support. Sarah, I prompted, your sister has just revealed a part of herself she felt she had to hide from everyone, including you. It doesn't erase the hurt, but can you find a way to move forward to support her as she tries to integrate these parts of her life? Sarah reached across the space, separating them, and took Evelyn's hand. It's going to take time. Evelyn, she said, her voice softer than before. A lot of time to rebuild trust. But I want my sister back, the real you. And if that means you dance, then I want to see you dance. It was a powerful moment of reconciliation, the first real step towards healing the fractured sisterly bond. The most challenging conversation, of course, was with David. His hurt was palpable, his love for Evelyn warring with the betrayal he felt. David, I said, Evelyn has been honest about why she lied, her fear of losing you, of you not accepting her passion. She wants to try and build an honest future with you. What does that future look like for you, knowing all of this? David looked at Evelyn, his gaze searching. I need time, he stated, his voice firm but not angry. I need to process this. I love Evelyn. I truly do. But trust is fundamental, and she broke it profoundly. I want to believe her, that she truly wants to change, to be honest. But it's not just about her passion for dancing, it's about the deception she built around it. I need to know that this secret keeping, this tendency to hide parts of herself is truly over. I need to know that if we build a life together, it will be transparent. Evelyn, looking directly at David, made a heartfelt plea. David, I know I broke your trust, and I am so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I was just so scared. But I want to change. I want to build an honest life with you. I want to be able to share all of myself with you, including my dancing. I will do whatever it takes to earn back your trust, to prove to you that I can be the partner you deserve, the one who is fully present and fully honest. The outcome, in Evelyn's case, wasn't a neatly tied bow or an immediate dramatic resolution. It was a realistic, open-ended journey characteristic of true psychological growth. David did not immediately say, yes, let's get married next week. Instead, he acknowledged the depth of the issue and the work ahead. He agreed to go to couples counseling with Evelyn to explore whether they could rebuild their relationship on a new foundation of honesty and mutual acceptance. He needed to see consistent, transparent change, not just a one-time confession. For Evelyn, the outcome was a profound shift in her self-perception and her approach to life. She committed to fully integrating her dancing into her primary life, not as a secret, but as a recognized and valued part of who she was. This meant having frank conversations with her marketing employer about her dance commitments, understanding that this might involve compromises or even a career change. It meant actively working with her therapist to address the underlying fears of disapproval and the compulsive need to please others that had driven her deception. She started rebuilding relationships with her mother and sister, one honest conversation at a time, moving away from the practice narratives and towards genuine vulnerability. The final image I have of Evelyn from that time is not of her walking off stage with David in a romantic embrace, but of her standing a little taller, her shoulders slightly less burdened. She had taken the first terrifying step towards authenticity. She understood that she couldn't go back to the double life. And while the path forward was uncertain and filled with challenges, it was a path of her own choosing, built on the solid ground of truth rather than the crumbling foundation of lies. It was a realistic outcome, acknowledging the long road ahead, but affirming the crucial first step towards self-acceptance and genuine connection. It was a journey just beginning, but at least she was finally on the right track, with her eyes open and without a single secret weighing her down. The journey for Evelyn, as it is for anyone who has lived with such profound deception, wasn't a sudden sprint to a finish line, but a marathon of consistent effort, self-reflection, and difficult conversations. We followed up with Evelyn and her family over the next few months, and her story became a powerful testament to the arduous but ultimately liberating process of confronting one's true self. Evelyn immediately started individual therapy to delve deeper into the root causes of her need for secrecy and her pervasive fear of disapproval. She discovered that much of it stemmed from her childhood, where her achievements were highly praised, but her more artistic, less practical inclinations were often subtly or sometimes overtly dismissed. This created a core belief within her that love and acceptance were conditional, tied to her ability to fulfill others' expectations rather than being inherent to who she was. The dancing, in essence, was her primal scream for individuality, an identity she felt she had to protect at all cost, even if it meant lying to those she loved. The conversations with her mother continued, often difficult and tear-filled, but crucial. Brenda learned to listen more, to ask open-ended questions, and to genuinely affirm Evelyn's choices, even if they weren't what she had originally envisioned. It wasn't about Brenda suddenly embracing dance as a viable career for Evelyn, but about her accepting Evelyn as a whole person, passions and all. This meant Brenda attending one of Evelyn's local dance performances, a step that, for her, was a monumental shift in perspective. To see her daughter truly shine on stage, to witness the pure joy and artistry, began to break down years of preconceived notions. With David, the path was even more intricate. They committed to couples therapy, and it was a tough road. David struggled deeply with the betrayal, the feeling that he hadn't truly known the woman he was about to marry. Evelyn, for her part, had to confront the immense pain she had caused him, not just through the lies, but through the emotional distance she had created. There were moments when it seemed like their relationship wouldn't survive. David needed reassurance, consistent transparency, and proof that this wasn't just a temporary act of confession, but a fundamental change in Evelyn's character. He questioned if she truly wanted to be with him or if he was just another part of the expected life she was trying to maintain. Evelyn had to show him, not just tell him. She made conscious efforts to include him in her dance life, inviting him to rehearsals, introducing him to her dance friends, sharing her passion openly. She also had to demonstrate that her commitment to their relationship was genuine and not just a convenience. This meant having honest discussions about their future, about the compromises that might be necessary for both of their careers and dreams to coexist. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but a conscious choice to rebuild brick by painful brick on a foundation of absolute honesty. In the end, David and Evelyn decided to postpone their wedding. It was a difficult decision, but a necessary one. They understood that rebuilding trust takes time, and they both needed to be certain they were making an informed, honest commitment to each other, not just patching over old wounds. They continued their counseling, working to understand each other's needs and fears, and Evelyn continued to work on herself, understanding that true authenticity wasn't just about revealing secrets, but about living consistently in integrity. Evelyn didn't give up her dancing, but she did make conscious decisions about how it would fit into her life. She found a more flexible arrangement with her marketing job, allowing her to balance her passions. She learned to communicate her needs and boundaries clearly rather than resorting to secrecy. She finally understood that while she couldn't control how others reacted to her choices, she could control her own integrity and honesty. Her story isn't about everything being perfect. It's about the courageous choice to dismantle a life of pretense and to embark on the challenging but ultimately freeing journey of self-acceptance and honest living. It's a testament to the fact that even when the truth is terrifying, it's always the only path to genuine connection and lasting peace. Evelyn came to us trapped, afraid, and fractured. She left with a clear vision of herself, a commitment to authenticity, and the very real possibility of rebuilding her most important relationships, not on illusions, but on the solid ground of her true self. That, to me, is always the most profound victory.